Hello and welcome to another edition of Business Ethics Hard Truths, and today I will be talking about what actually killed business ethics. And for that, I would like to make a reference to the online conference which I opened to speak about my manifesto called Integrity Crisis for the new yearbook 2021, Global Ethics, Compliance and Integrity Edition 2021, which I really recommend because it's a solid book covering all the important salient points and issues that dog compliance and business ethics. So I did mention in my speech at the conference what exactly contributed to the demise of business ethics. But I would like to go over those points again in a bit of a different context, because there are a few more things that crept up which could explain this drop of interest to business ethics. Well, first off, I just have to list the main culprit here, being its overuse. Everyone talked about business ethics forever. Anyone. So therefore, it immediately lost its shine, because people realized that if so many people feel like they are entitled to talk on merits of business ethics, it just takes the mickey out of the game. People think like, well, it's so easy for everyone to lie these days, and therefore they could be lying about business ethics as well, because we'll look up at all these people. Now our bosses, can talk about business ethics without batting an eye forever, for ages. So that's one element. Then also the fact that slowly but surely compliance has been adopted and essentially assimilated by legal departments to save money in the budget for companies. But at the same time, ethics, being part of compliance, has also been indoctrinated into the realm of law. We know what's happening with the rule of law now, but that's where the legal department, digested business ethics, because lawyers are paid to practice the law. They're not paid to practice ethics. So therefore, that just contributed to this loss of interest. And essentially, another component which is very important is because we live in the post-truth age, compounded by the ongoing COVID pandemic, which seems like it's not going to stop anytime soon. So people are they're all withdrawn, and they are in survival mode. So therefore, for them to actually believe someone, they have to feel it deep in their gut. It has to be coming from this intuition that anyone who is talking about higher moral standards and ethics, that they can actually trust the messenger. Thirdly, there is another development aside from this, because ethics used to be looked at by employees as a bit of like a soft law tool that they have, or they believe they had, in case they witness unethical behavior of their bosses and their misconduct. So they could appeal to higher ethical standards that any company profess to observe and uphold. Well, apparently, when they realized that they cannot seek any organizational justice appealing to business ethics, they also dropped their interest, because imagine this, that's what I mentioned at the very beginning. Since bosses adopted now their talk on ethics, and they can easily talk about it, it just created cognitive dissonance for employees, because they see their bosses, their managers profess and say one thing but do something entirely different. So therefore they just realized, okay, well, that they poisoned the well, we don't want it anymore. And then there's another important trend now with whistleblower protection against retaliation becoming the mainstream narrative, with the EU whistleblower directive, and with the new ISO standard 37002. This whole talk about business ethics / integrity is being replaced with whistleblowers. They will be doing all the dirty work, basically holding accountable those who seem to thrive above any rules and regulations and laws, of course. So therefore, another component which is also important to know, ethicists themselves outside of their compliance circle, who are, who are hardly moral and could hardly serve as role models, they also contributed to that demise, simply just because, they could not be seen as someone having the moral authority. So therefore, if that moral authority is missing in ethicists, how can we hold our business leaders accountable for what they cannot physically have just because their brains are messed up by, the wrong chemicals because of power and money? So therefore, ethicists themselves kind of slipped down a notch, because at the same time there was another tendency, with the organizational and executive coaches who also lost, this support and interest among their constituency and target audiences, just because people feel like they don't get inspired by what they hear from them anymore, because look out the window. We live in the completely crazy reality where no one can be trusted. No experts, no politicians, no public institutions, no authorities out there. Everyone's consumed by this existential crisis. So therefore, if you take that motivational, inspirational component out of the business ethics, there's little left. Well, yeah, there are some ethicists who sort of like went down a different track when they embraced science or antique philosophers' musings on this, but hardly anyone has the time to actually focus on those difficult antique truths distilled by, well, now we have practical philosophers. They used to be very popular just right before the COVID pandemic arrived. So that's another element that's been a new normal. And since moral leadership cannot take hold among our business leaders, no matter how much the World Economic Forum talked about it, well, that creates an interesting, challenge. It cannot come from people that are kind of below our leaders, because leaders would not listen to anyone. Well, they're not listening to any spiritual gurus for sure, as they're not looking up to them as a source of their inspiration. So at the same time, it just creates this new challenge where we look up to our business leaders to be the moral leadership. They cannot physically provide that moral leadership for the populace. And who's going to bridge that gap? Well, I would like to say that at the conference, I did announce our experiment/project called TBAY, Transformative Business Ethics Initiative. You can easily find videos when I talk about it with my partner, Dr. Melinda Fouts, and it sits in the folder called TBAY in my YouTube channel. We believe that we can harness the power of behavioral compliance and ethical leadership, along with the experience that Dr. Fouts amassed over years, 24 years of practice as an executive coach and psychotherapist working with the C-suite. So what we did, we combined all of that to see if we could get that new synergy that would actually help everyone become unstuck on the issue of business ethics. So I'll be back with more, so stay tuned.